Hi there, everybody, and I'd like to welcome you to another Grey House Literary Agency educational video. Today I want to spend the time talking about the concept of deciding whether or not you're honestly ready to become a professional writer. And what we're talking about here is are you ready at this point to start submitting to editors, to start submitting to agents? So what we want to do is we want to talk about those things that you need to consider before you actually take this particular leap. One thing that I would encourage you to do is to take some notes as we're going through here. And if along the way you end up having some additional questions, I'll give you some contact information for me at the end of this lesson. And you can certainly email me and say, hey, I saw the video, but I had a couple other questions for you. So our goals for today are pretty simple. We want to understand really what it takes to be a professional author, and it's really a lot more than just having a story finished. We want to kind of talk about the differences between what a hobby writer might be and a professional writer might be. That there are some differences. Again, it's more than just having a quality manuscript. We also want to talk about what needs to be in place before you start making this particular move. There's things that you have to have in place that you have to be thinking about before you send out that first submission, and that will kind of give you a checklist of a few things for all you new authors, of some things to think about. Now, a rationale for doing this is pretty simple. I opened up the agency in 2003, and since that time I've seen a lot of authors come and go, and many of these authors simply weren't ready. Had one author in particular that I signed to the agency early on, and as soon as we started into the process of submitting projects and getting her moving, she panicked. She mentally wasn't ready for the game. Saw another author who, spent 3 years, and we really thought that she was ready to go. And at the point I offered her a contract, and in fact, she had 5 agents who were all looking at her. She took the leap. She mentally wasn't ready to go. So what we have to do is we have to really understand what the rationale is. And what you have to remember is up until now, writing's just been fun, right? And that's what you've wanted to do. But what you want to understand is that if you jump into this and mentally you're not ready, you're going to ruin your potential career later on because of rushed moves. Not because you do stupid things, but because mentally you're going to be burnt out. You're going to say, I just can't do this anymore, even if you could. Even if you had some better stories in you, you're going to realize that those mistakes you made just wore you out. And seriously, too many writers burn out too fast. And what I want you to think about here are all those athletes who try so hard to get there, and they try to get there too fast. My son swims for a competitive swim team up here in the Pacific Northwest, and I've seen a lot of people, pushing and pushing and pushing, and they really want to make it there. And then by the time that they get up to the level he's at right now, they're tired of swimming, and they had a great career. And because they're tired of swimming, you even find that their times drop and things like that, and the quality of their performance is gone. And again, it isn't just you, but even other people around you will get hurt. I want you to think about this, is that if you jump into this, you brought your family into this as well. You brought your significant other into this conversation. And by doing so, if you get burned out and then maybe 2 years later you're going to go, oh, I'm going to try it again, they're not going to be with you on this one. They're going to say, hey, I worked with you the first time, and I don't know what's up, but I don't think I can go through this again. So you really want to be cautious of that. Now, what we want to do is we want to talk now about really the differences and some of the small differences between being a hobby writer a professional writer. When you think about as a hobby writer, you get to write on your own time. Something, you get up in the morning, you feel like writing, you write a paragraph, and you go, wow, I'm really good at that. And you can stop right there. But what you have to understand on the other side, the professional writers, you have deadlines. You can't just sit there and say, today, I just don't feel like writing. I mean, you're going to want to do that several times. Every now and then that will happen, but you've got editors waiting for you. You've got agents waiting for you. You've got art departments and things like that. And you've got to get that story done. You cannot fall behind. As a hobby writer, look, you can write whatever you want. If you want to write a story about alien vampire bunnies, and it's a joke that I have here at the Gray House Literary Agency, you can do a story about alien vampire bunnies. You want to write a 500,000 word manuscript? You can write that 500,000 word manuscript. Is it going to sell? Absolutely not, but you could write it. You could write inspirational erotica as far as we're concerned. That's fine. That's what you get when you're doing a hobby writing, right? It doesn't matter. It's just about you and writing a story. When you're on the professional side, however, you have to be writing for the market. And I don't care if you want to be an independent author, where you're doing things self-publishing, or you're going through traditional publishing lines. Your ultimate goal is sales, and you have to write to what the market is looking for. Along the same lines, you have to be writing for what your editor is looking for. So if the editor says, I need you to do a story that does this, that's what you got to write. And you could sit there and say, oh, I don't want to, it's a creative privilege and everything, but you signed a contract, so you have to be aware of that. As a hobby writer, quality is important, but it's not a requirement. In other words, you could write a completely crappy manuscript and it's okay. It was fun to write. And maybe it was flat. Maybe it had all these problems to it. And that's okay. If you talk to a lot of professional writers, they're going to say that they have files of completed stories that were just fun to write, but they'll never sell in the least bit. So you have to understand that quality. It's important, but it's not a requirement. We still obviously want to write some great stories, but whatever. When you're a professional writer, that quality has to be there. You've got to focus your attention. You have to know your craft. You have to know why you're doing things. Because if you write a cruddy story and you get bad reviews, your readers are not going to be coming back to you. Let's talk about some business sides of things. Conferences, guess what? Conferences, they're social time. You go to a conference, you go and hang out, and you go to the book signings, because that's great because you get a lot of free books when you go there, and you spend all this time doing fun stuff. But guess what? When you go to a conference as a professional writer, it's all business. That means you are there in a business outfit, that you are going to act accordingly, you're going to behave accordingly, and you are going to be networking and you're going to be talking to people. Okay? When we talk about a hobby writer, back over on this other side here, you have no other expectations other than being a writer. That's all that you have to focus on. You don't have, like I said, you can just sit there and say, I just want to read, I just want to write, everything's great. But the deal is, when you become a professional writer, you have to automatically know that you're going to be losing writing time because of the business side of things. You're going to have to spend a lot of your time on social media. You're going to be online talking about blogging with people, doing marketing plans, you name it, you're going to be doing a lot of that stuff. So you need to be aware that you are going to lose out on some of the writing time. Now, what we want to do is we want to ask, what else is there other than this writing? In other words, if we're saying, am I ready to make this jump yet? What are some of the things that I need to consider? Okay, so let's talk about these. First of all, you got to have some mental readiness. You got to be with it in the brain to say, hey, I'm ready to take this jump. You have to have a knowledge of the business. You have to have something in the future, right? You cannot be a one-hit wonder. You've got to have some support networks, such as professionals, colleagues, and families, and you have to be financially ready. Now, if you feel like I rushed through this, it's okay, because I'm going to get ready to break each of these down individually. So let's kind of talk about each of these here. When we talk about mental readiness, here's some questions you need to be asking yourself to assess your own situation. How do you feel if somebody tells you your writing's bad? Are you ready for that? Are you ready for those rejection letters? Because guess what? They're going to come. And you have to have a heart of steel to be able to say, it's okay, it's not a problem, I'm going to move on, we're going to go beyond that. You can't have that whole day, your whole day completely being ruined. How can you handle stress? Because guess what? It's going to get stressful. You're going to suddenly, one of my authors right now, in the middle of, as I'm taping this right now, just finished up one book, getting ready to start another one, and guess what? Right in the middle of all of this, she has her revisions back for another book that she's working on. So all of a sudden, she is like piled up with a lot of work to do. And this is not her only job. She also happens to be a college instructor. So when you have this, the question is, how do you handle that stress? How do you work through that? You also need to think, how do you handle writer's block? Because guess what? You're not going to be able to have it. It's as simple as that. You're going to have some days that you're like, I'm not really sure exactly the way to go. But you cannot have a day or 2 days or a week where you're just going, I have no clue. And then the last question that I want to ask you is, do you work well under pressure? Remember that hobby writer, there is no pressure. You can kind of do whatever you darn well want to do. But the question is, can you work well under pressure? Can you work well when somebody's pushing you? When you know you have a deadline on the line, that you know that you've got to get a decent story, that you know you've got to have a decent proposal, and that proposal's got to be good. Can you do that? That's the next question. So let's talk about your business knowledge things. Okay? Because if you decide to make this jump, you have to understand the business of publishing. And I always talk about this, and we're going to talk about this with this well, we'll just talk about it with the business. But if you think about this, right, you go to school, you go to college to be prepared to go to work in a job, right? Essentially, that's our process that we're going through, right? I'm not going to just say, I'm going to go become, I don't know, I'm going to go become a great chef and not take classes and not understand everything that it takes to be a chef or to run a restaurant, right? I'm not going to just open those up, right? We've all seen these TV shows. I love watching, for example, like Restaurants Impossible, which is over on the Cooking Channel, where you've got these people who have opened up a restaurant, they have no clue how to run a restaurant. We just don't do that, right? So you've got to have a sense of the business. So just a couple things. What do you know about contracts? Right? If you're going to do this on your own, if you're going to do, publish, go through the self-publishing route, do you understand contract law? And you can't just say, I'm going to go hire myself a lawyer, because you need to hire a lawyer who's aware of professional publishing contracts, not just any old contract. What do you know about the editorial process? In other words, do you know all of the steps and the time it takes? And are you clear on that, of the procedures that it takes from when you finish that book to the moment it gets to the bookshelf? Because it's important that you know those steps so that you're not harassing an editor going, well, why isn't my book already done? Because guess what? It's 6 months down the line before your book comes out. So you have to have some knowledge of that. Do you understand what it takes to market a book, right? And that's really a challenge in today's world. Here in 2016, we just don't have we don't have the bookstores anymore. People are not going to just discover your book by walking around and seeing them on the shelves. So now you need to understand different marketing techniques. And you can't figure that out after that book came out. You have to figure it out beforehand. Now we get to the craft part of things. Do you even know what you do in your stories and why you do them? Now, if you're doing things in your stories, you're putting in certain plot devices or whatever, or you're structuring your story a certain way because you learned it in a workshop, that doesn't mean that you know the craft well enough, right? You have to understand when you put a scene break in a certain place or you craft a dialogue scene a certain way, you need to know why you were doing that and what the effect is on the story and the readers. And that's really important, because without that firm understanding, your stories are going to be flat and they aren't going to sell. Okay? The last part is, what about the roles? And this kind of connects back into the whole editorial process. Do you understand the roles of the agents and the editors and the publicists, and copy editors and marketing managers and so forth? Because every one of these people play a role in your book, but they only do certain parts of those. So if you're expecting an agent to publish your book, you don't understand what an agent does. Okay, so you need to be very clear on each of those ideas of where you're going to with these. Now let's talk about this next part, about your future writing. For some of you, you might have just finished up your first book. That's it, and you're getting ready to fire things off. That's okay, we all have to start someplace. But do you know where you're going to be in the next 1 year, next 5 years? You need to have a sense of that. You can't just say, I finished my book, now I'm going to sell it and then figure it out later. You have to also ask yourself, what is the status of those next books? Do you have any books planned, or are you really a one-hit wonder? Now this is really important for the editors and the agents, because they make the money not off of your first book, but your later books. That's where the money starts coming in at. That's where you're going to start to see the sales. That's where you're going to get the readers. Okay? You're not going to, unless you have this just bang-up book that's a one-hit wonder from, that's just out of the world, you're not going to see anything from that. That book's going to go on the bookshelf and it's going to be gone. Nobody's going to buy it. Okay? Think about this. If an editor wants to sign you for a 3-book contract, do you even have those books in place? Do you even know what those next books are going to be planned? They might not be finished, but you have to understand, if they say a 3-book contract, because guess what? Those next books are going to be coming, and it won't be 3 years later, 3 years later. They're going to want to see those books a heck of a lot faster. What else do you have to offer that editor or an agent? And again, that's connected back into those books. You have to look at you're not just selling a book. You're selling you, your book, the package, and the whole deal to these editors and agents. And they want to see a complete package. So you need to really ask yourself, what else do I have to offer? And that connects into that final question. Are you writing in the same genre as those other books? Because if you decide that you're going to go, well, I have a book of poetry, a nonfiction book, a romance novel, and a sci-fi screenplay, the odds are you're not going to find anybody who's going to want to hire you, because you are all over the place. They're going to want to say, if you're doing a screenplay, what other screenplays do you have that all fall under that same genre? And that's really, really important. Now let's talk about this next part, and it's your support networks, okay? Because you can't do this on your own. As a hobbyist, you could, right? It was just you and your book, your notebook, and you were fine. So you have to ask yourself, what about your support networks? Are you part of a professional writing organization? Are you attending conferences? Okay? Do you have critique partners? Is your family aware of your writing and career goals? Because you've got to have your family on board. They're going to have to understand that you're going to need 2, 3, 4 hours a day to write. And they've got to be behind you and say, it's okay, when you go into the office and write, we're going to take care of things for you. Do you have professional colleagues who can help you out with maybe the writing or the marketing? And that's especially important for those of you who might not be strong in grammar or punctuation. Do you have that support network to do the editing for you? Because you're going to need to have that. Do you have people that can help you out with web design, computers, advertising, and so forth? Because that's also going to be important, especially in this digital age. You need to know that you have those people there. And do you even have some connections for reviews? Do you even know how to get those reviews? Do you want to start thinking about those ahead of time when that book starts to come out? Your publisher might do a lot of that, but you have to be able to know those as well, because you've got to get that publicity going as soon as that book hits the bookshelves. So you want to make sure that you are ready for that. Now, the next part is asking yourself, financially, are you ready for this? Because you've got to understand, you are writing for free. Everything's on a gamble here. You are writing for free. If you decide to do this in a self-publishing idea, you are writing for free, and you won't see any money until those people start buying your books. you won't see any money. If you're going to go in the traditional market, you might get yourself an advance, but you still have to be prepared to do more than just get that money. You are not going to be able to make a living off of your one single book. So what you have to ask yourself is, are you financially prepared to maybe build a professional web presence? That means you're going to have to buy a website. You're going to have to maintain that website, maybe maintain a blog, whatever that might be. Are you ready to attend numerous conferences? Because now you have to go to those conferences because it's all about marketing. Are you in a financial place where you can devote more time to your writing? If you are in a work situation where you don't have a whole lot of time to write, this is not the time for you to be doing that. Now the next one is, are you planning to give up your day job? A lot of authors think with their first book they're going to quit their day job and make all their money. But the question is, are you actually in a financial place to do that? Okay? For most authors, they are told, don't give up your day job because you don't know what's going to go on. And then the last part is, do you have enough cash flow to ensure that you have a quality writing place? Which means, guess what? If you're writing, you need to have a decent desk. You need to have a good chair to sit in, the office space, phone quality, your computers, your computer software. You can't just operate off of freeware anymore. It's got to be the good stuff now. And you need to know that you have all of those materials ready for you. Now here's something to consider. And I stumbled across this quote, but I think it's just something to think about. And it comes from good old Malcolm Gladwell. And he says, what do we tell our children? Haste makes waste. Look before you leap. Stop and think. Don't judge a book by its cover. I really want to focus in on this first part, right? We tell our kids like this, haste makes waste. If we rush through this, we're going to end up with garbage. Look before you leap. Stop and think. Now listen to this. We believe that we are always better off gathering as much information as possible and spending as much time as possible in deliberation. What we're saying here is take your time. You don't need to rush this, and that's really important. So I want to leave you with your task here, and that's before you start sending out that query letter to anybody. I want you to take the time to assess where you're at with your writing. Really make some decisions if this is what you want to do. I want you to know that you don't have to send that manuscript out. Okay, you don't have to send everything out once you hit the end. And you have to be honest with yourself. It's okay. If you say, I'm not ready, guess what? You're not ready, and it's okay. We're not going to hate you for that. And that also connects into this next part. Do not be swayed by peer pressure. Please don't do that. You're going to have people go, oh, this story's amazing. You need to publish it. And they're going to start to push you. And you need to say, I'm not ready about that. I want you to take the time to go back through and think about each of these points that we talked about. Really digest those. And more importantly, I want you to be prepared for what's ahead. Okay? Because jumping into professional writing is a lot different than maybe what you've been doing up until this point. Now, as always, I always encourage people, part of the policy or the philosophy of Grey House Literary Agency is to provide education. So there's a lot of ways that you can get in contact with me. You can certainly look up the Grey House Agency at www.greyhouseagency.com. I am on Twitter, so definitely follow me on Twitter. You can always ask me questions there. I'm also on Facebook, and that would also be a great place. And one thing to always be aware of is that I am always available to work with writing groups. I'm here to do guest blogs, I can do articles, and a lot of other educational opportunities. So if you are part of a writing group and you are somebody who says, I definitely want to do this, and I want to get Scott here, you push them and get them in contact with me, or you contact me, and we will make this work. And I can be out for a weekend, a week-long seminar, a week workshop, weekend seminar. We could do things online, even via Skype. So I am 100% available for you. I look forward to seeing you more and talking to you more online.